Hello, and welcome back to part 3 of Speaking for the Unborn. This will be the most difficult part of the talk, as we're now going to watch a series of short animations illustrating the different abortion techniques. These were made by Dr. Anthony Levatino, a former abortionist. And even though they're only animations, they're very difficult to watch. But again, it's critical that we know the truth of abortion, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. We begin with medical abortions.
This is a procedure in which the mother swallows pills in order to terminate her baby, and it is performed up to the 10th week of pregnancy. The procedure involves 2 steps. Step 1. At the abortion clinic or doctor's office, the woman takes pills which contain mifepristone, also called RU46. RU46 blocks the action of a hormone called progesterone. Progesterone is naturally produced in the mother's body to stabilize the lining of the uterus. When RU46 blocks progesterone, the lining of the mother's uterus breaks down, cutting off blood and nourishment to the baby, who then dies inside the mother's womb. Step 2. 24 to 48 hours after taking RU46, the woman takes misoprostol, also called Cytotec, that is administered either orally or vaginally. RU46 and misoprostol together cause severe cramping, contractions, and often heavy bleeding to force the dead baby out of the woman's uterus. The process can be very intense and painful, and the bleeding and contractions can last from a few hours to several days.
Next, dilatation and curettage, or DNCs.
This is the most frequently performed abortion and is used typically from 5 to 13 weeks of pregnancy. The abortionist uses a series of metal rods called dilators, like these, which increase in thickness, and inserts them into the cervix to dilate it, gaining access to the inside of the uterus where the baby resides. The baby has a heartbeat, fingers, toes, arms, and legs, but its bones are still weak and fragile. The abortionist takes a suction catheter, like this one. This is a 14 French suction catheter. It's clear plastic, about 9 inches long, and it has a hole through the center. It is inserted through the cervix into the uterus. The suction machine is then turned on with a force 10 to 20 times more powerful than your household vacuum cleaner. The baby is rapidly torn apart by the force of the suction and squeezed through this tubing down into the suction machine, followed by the placenta.
And now, dilatation and evacuation, or D&Es.
D&E is performed between 13 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. Once the cervix has been stretched open, the suction tube is placed inside. The suction machine is turned on, and pale yellow amniotic fluid surrounding the baby is suctioned out through the catheters. With babies this big, they don't fit through catheters this size. The baby's bones and skull are too strong to be torn apart by suction alone. This is a Sofer clamp. The abortionist uses this clamp to grasp an arm or leg. Once he has a firm grip, the abortionist pulls hard in order to tear the limb from the baby's body. One by one, the rest of the limbs are removed, along with the intestines, the spine, and the heart and lungs. Usually the most difficult part of the procedure is extracting the baby's head, which is about the size of a large plum at 20 weeks. The head is grasped and crushed. The abortionist knows he has crushed the skull when a white substance comes out of the cervix. This was the baby's brains. The abortionist then removes skull pieces. He removes the placenta and any leftover parts of the baby with a curette, scraping the lining of the uterus for any remaining tissue. The abortionist then collects the baby parts and reassembles them to make sure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Once all the parts have been accounted for, the abortion is complete.
And now, induction abortions.
Today I'm going to describe a 3rd trimester induced abortion, which is performed at 25 weeks to term. At this point, the baby is almost fully developed and viable, meaning he or she could survive outside the womb if the mother were to go into labor prematurely. Because the baby is so large and developed, this procedure takes 3 or 4 days to complete. On day 1, the abortionist uses a large needle to inject a drug called digoxin. The abortionist inserts the needle with the digoxin through the woman's abdomen or through her vagina and into the baby, targeting either the head, torso, or heart. The baby will feel it. Babies at this stage feel pain. When the needle pierces the baby's body and the digoxin takes effect, the life of the baby will end. The abortionist then inserts multiple sticks of seaweed called laminaria into the woman's cervix. They will slowly open up the cervix for delivery of a stillborn baby. While the woman waits for the laminaria to dilate her cervix, she carries her dead baby inside of her for 2 to 3 days. On day 2, the abortionist replaces the laminaria and may perform a second ultrasound to ensure the baby is dead. If the child is still alive, he administers another lethal dose of digoxin. The woman then goes back to where she is staying while her cervix continues to dilate. If she goes into labor and is unable to make it to the clinic in time, she will give birth at home or in a hotel. In this case, she may be advised to deliver her baby into a bathroom toilet. The abortionist then comes to remove the baby and clean up. If she can make it to the clinic, she will do so during her severest contractions and deliver her dead son or daughter. If the baby does not come out whole, then the procedure becomes a D&E, a dilation and evacuation, and the abortionist uses clamps and forceps to dismember the baby, piece by piece. Once the placenta and all the body parts have been removed, the abortion is complete.
Lastly, I'll just briefly mention partial birth abortion, a procedure so gruesome that I won't even show an animation. Just a few brief drawings is more than sufficient to illustrate its horror. The procedure was banned by Congress in 2003 with an exception for the life of the mother. Briefly, the abortionist uses forceps to grab the leg of the living baby and pulls it out of the mother's body. The baby's body is then forcibly delivered until only its head remains in the birth canal. The abortionist then inserts scissors into the baby's skull base, severs the baby's spinal cord, and then vacuums out the baby's brain. And bear in mind, this barbaric procedure is one that Planned Parenthood has actively fought to protect and expand. Thankfully, the gruesome part of this talk is now over, and we can finish with some simple abortion facts that come up when defending the unborn. First, a few words about the morning after pill, often called Plan B. And there's only a few facts to know. It's designed for use within 3 days of unprotected sex or when contraception fails, as in the case of a broken condom. And it works by 3 mechanisms. It can prevent ovulation, so there's no egg to fertilize, or it can prevent fertilization by thickening cervical mucus, thereby preventing the sperm from ever reaching the egg. Or it works by preventing implantation of the fertilized egg. This third mechanism then, which works after fertilization, means that it's causing an abortion. So the morning after pill, Plan B, also works as an abortifacient, which is another important term to know. It causes abortions. Next, we have to spend a little time speaking about Planned Parenthood. Not just because they're the abortion industry leader, but because they're also the most vocal advocates for abortion in the world. So here are 5 facts you should know about Planned Parenthood. Fact number 1, Planned Parenthood is the most prolific killer of unborn children in this country. 1/3 of a million abortions each year. That's 1 abortion every 97 seconds. Fact number 2, abortion is the reason for Planned Parenthood's very existence. They spend millions of dollars trying to convince the world that their core mission is actually women's health care. But that's simply a falsehood, recently admitted by their most recent past president, who stated, "Our core mission is providing, protecting, and expanding access to abortion and reproductive health care." Fact number 3, Planned Parenthood has proudly racist origins, which are devastating blacks and minorities today. It was founded by Margaret Sanger, a very proud racist and eugenicist. She didn't hide her racism and advocated for the elimination of indiscriminate breeding by minorities whom she considered human weeds. And her plan has worked remarkably well, as nearly 80% of their abortion centers are now located in minority neighborhoods. In fact, abortion has now become the #1 killer of black lives in America, more than heart disease, cancer, and gun violence combined. Fact number 4, Planned Parenthood aborts unborn children and then sells their body parts for profit. They defend this practice as, quote, reasonable reimbursement for tissue donation services, but undercover video proves otherwise. Video, by the way, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals deemed to be authentic and not deceptively edited. And as a former clinic director of Planned Parenthood in Houston testified, just her center alone generates more than $1 million per year from this, quote, donation of fetal body parts. And finally, fact number 5. Planned Parenthood is financed with our tax dollars, over $500 million each year. These payments have always had a fundamental restriction, the Height Amendment, which forbids them to be used for abortion-related services. An amendment, by the way, the Democratic Party is now fighting to repeal. But even with this restriction, abortion funding still facilitates abortion at Planned Parenthood. because it frees up non-abortion-related profits for abortion services, a principle called fungibility. And it's this fungibility that permits Planned Parenthood to flourish as the leading killer of the unborn in this country. And by the way, how much profit does Planned Parenthood make each year? Well, in 2016, for example, $77 million. Profits that have allowed their political action wing to pledge $45 million to pro-choice candidates in this most recent election cycle. So the next time someone brags to you about how wonderful Planned Parenthood is, you can tell them that Planned Parenthood is the single most prolific killer of unborn children in this country, particularly the children of blacks and minorities, and that they then sell their body parts for profit. That's Planned Parenthood. And what do you say when someone argues that Planned Parenthood does provide some important healthcare services, like Pap smears or HIV testing? I simply tell them I cannot be supportive of the Pap smear going on in room A while a baby is being dismembered in room B. It's that simple. This concludes part 3 of this presentation. Again, I thank you for your kind attention.